So here I was, Crossroads, right? And this was quite recent. I had. So, I sort of boiled in it very briefly, and then I did what seemed like the prudent thing to do. I reached out to about a dozen, close, my intimates, right? Friends, family, and sort of ran that situation past them. Like, hey, look, I have this offer, but I've been moving in this other direction, and I've been sort of trying to sort of this other direction, but here's this thing, and it seems like a good opportunity, and here's what I'm thinking, basically, is what I laid out. And then I said to everybody else, like, okay, so tell me what I'm not thinking, right? Or emphasize things that I may not be emphasizing. I'm looking for outside perspectives to consider. And I got back a lot of great feedback. If ever you are wrestling with this kind of thing, I highly, highly recommend you do this sort of thing. And obviously it helps if you cultivate a social network full of, thoughtful people, right? And I had asked people from lots of different backgrounds. I know people from lots of different backgrounds, lots of different career paths, lots of different ages, lots of different approaches, and correspondingly, I got lots of different answers back, which, I considered at great depth as I was sort of trying to work my way through this. So, I was sort of trying to process it through, and as I did, predictably enough, my unconscious responded with dreams of various kinds. There was a really interesting dream that I had, which involved, I won't get into the whole thing, but it involved the final image of me being handed a glass of ice water, and then the water starting to drain out, and then the glass dissolving such that I was just left with this handful of ice. And in the dream, I suddenly recognized that it was a dream. I didn't go quite full lucid. There were sort of analysts. There was like an Ian McKellen, Gandalf style analyst, and some other analysts who are real people. And I went to him and I was like, this is a symbol. Like, what does it mean? What does it mean? And then I, of course, woke up. This was very funny in the context because the start of the dream was like, I'm not sure what I should do. And the Ian McKellen character was like, I think he knows exactly what he has to do. He has to sit with it. And the analysts sort of chuckle, and I, over on the couch, sort of eye roll, and I'm like, ugh, I knew you would say that, like analysts. Which was a very funny symbol, of course, for the end of the dream, which is not me sitting with it, but me going, what do I do with this? And that, of course, was very much how I felt, right? My hands were full, and full of frozen, right? Full of undrinkable, full of whatever. We can get into the dream symbolism of that, more at some point if you like, but the long and the short of it was, like, I started having dreams, as you might expect, as I'm kind of boiling through this. And also, as I'm kind of talking about it, I'm talking to somebody on Zoom, a friend, and I'm kind of going through it, and I'm very da-da-da-da-da. And at one point then I get a knock at the door, and we were expecting a grocery delivery, so I assume that's what it is. And then, so I get up and I go to help bring in the groceries. And I realized that my partner is talking to somebody, and they're talking about submitting a paper. And I'm like, oh, that's weird, I guess. I mean, there's no reason that a grocery delivery person can't also be sort of an academic. But I'm like, oh, that's kind of interesting. That's unusual. And then I rounded the corner and realized that they weren't. The grocery had already been dropped off. They were actually talking to a neighbor of ours. Now, this is a neighbor who we've had almost no contact with. Over the course of the pandemic, I have often sort of had this desire to form some social ties right here, as many people have. And, it's a relatively private kind of building that I live in, and I'm on good terms with the neighbor down the hall who's a musician, but I don't see her that much. We have, different working schedules. The neighbor across the hall is an older woman, and likewise, we're friendly, but she's not there that much. And then there is this couple down the hall. And the times that I had tried to engage them, my sense was that they were quite aloof. I didn't know if they were just shy or introverted, but there were a few times I had sort of, tried to make a conversation. And that kind of conversation making, often is like in the elevator or something, and that doesn't happen anymore because we don't share elevators in that way. And so this older fellow, was at the door, and I knew already that he was a professor emeritus. in philosophy, I thought, although it turns out actually it's a political science thing. And so he was at the door and he's sort of asking my partner if he can get help with submitting a paper. He's sort of saying, all these, whatever things are electronic now, and so I don't quite trust a computer. And so I come out to help with the groceries, and my partner says, "Oh, you might want to talk to Anderson. He has some experience there." So I come forward, and he's like, "Oh, hello, I'm whatever." We don't shake hands, but hello, I'm so and so. I'm like, "Hi, I'm Anderson. What can I help you with?" And he says, "Well, I've written a paper, and I'm looking to submit it to a journal." But he said all of the journal submission things are electronic, and he's an older fellow, I would guess maybe in his 80s. And he's like, I don't quite trust myself. And so I just wondered, he said, I've got a friend who's going to help me with it, but I wondered if I could kind of call on you to show me this, if need be, to guide me through it. And I said, well, I have some experience there. I've done those electronic submissions. Every journal is a little different, but, I definitely can find my way around. And so, I agreed. It's like, yeah, absolutely. Here's my email address, and, drop me a line. And then I came back, and of course, immediately, this sort of hit me in its sort of synchronistic, symbolic way, right? Which was like, the professor just came knocking, right? The professor just came knocking. And the professor wants my help. The professor wants, right? There is a knowledge transfer. I've spoken before about how the modern era is very unusual in the respect that knowledge transfers now flow from the young to the old. That's historically very unusual, right? Normally it would be the case that the elders in a community would be the repository of knowledge, and they would teach the younger. And as long as knowledge remains relatively stable, that's what you get. But in a period of sort of accelerating change, like the one that we live in, where technology is constantly turning over, you often have the reverse, right? The young educating the old. And, this is the classic, like, helping grandma to reprogram her VCR or to set the clock. And, nobody has VCRs anymore. But you know my point, showing your grandparents how to use email, this kind of thing. And so it was very much in this space. And it was like, okay, there is this reversal here where I'm being asked to help navigate this space. But also it was kind of invitation, right? The professor came knocking. Now, this has never happened before. Like I said, I've been living here for quite a while. It's never happened before. We've never had a kind of open exchange. It was quite friendly. I ended up reading his paper. He got it submitted actually without me, but I ended up reading his paper. He sent me his paper, and we've had some nice chats since. It's not my field, political science, but it was very interesting. It was about Canada during the period of the Cold War, the 50s specifically. So quite interesting, something I'm quite interested in. And the synchronistic aspect of this, the professor just came calling, right, was very much in line with what I felt around this crossroads. The professor just came calling. And it sort of bears saying in this respect, and I'm going to come back to Crossroads generally in a second. I don't want to belabor this over long. I probably already have. I don't want to belabor this over long, but it wasn't my intention. It wasn't my intention to be a university instructor. That was not on my radar. It was maybe originally in my early 20s, sort of part of a generalized fantasy around the notion of honorary degree, and right, sort of getting the accolades without going through jumping through the official hoops or something. So I had that kind of idea, right? Very ego driven. But I had pretty much left that behind. It was not my intention to get into teaching. I taught, becoming a teacher at all was, right, as a high school teacher, was a somewhat unexpected situation for me. I had family tell me for years that I should do tutoring, and I was like, I don't have the patience. And then I finally did it, and it turned out I quite enjoyed it. And then from that, openings started to emerge to teach high school, and it turned out, I actually quite like that. And I got quite involved in teaching in that way, in a very unorthodox way, as you might expect, but nevertheless, right, being very interested in it, not least because of my own misgivings about school, right? As a high school dropout, I had pretty deep misgivings about school. And likewise, I didn't exactly stumble into being, a TA, but it was not an expected route. I didn't anticipate it occurring. And so when it came up, when the opportunity arose, I took it, and it turned out it was also teaching, and I quite liked it. And then when the opportunity for instruction came up, I took it, and I also quite liked that. And then when I was there was a period where I was done with school, and I thought, well, I'm going to continue to do my stuff with the lab, with the Consciousness and Wisdom Studies Lab, and I'll continue to co-author things, right? Work with John Vervaeke and so on. Like, I'll continue to do some of that stuff. But, like, I'm pretty much done with teaching. That was my idea. And then it kind of came calling again. And so by degrees, I began to teach, more and more. And I had wanted to teach the courses which I now teach, right? I had wanted to do that, but I hadn't sort of formally gone looking for it in some sense. I hadn't lined myself up for it. And so again, it had this quality of sort of, falling into it a bit, right? Obviously, right, my efforts, were directed at a certain point, and I had put myself on the radar in a certain kind of way, but also it was a bit unexpected. It was a bit unexpected. Now, since that time, obviously, I've put in a lot of actual conscious effort. So, going through the advancement process at U of T involves a lot of things. Last year I had to, immediately before pandemic, I had to write like 100-page pedagogical philosophy and a review of my teaching style and, my accomplishments, all this jazz. And the same thing came up. I was nominated for some awards, and I had to put some stuff in. But the point is that, like, I really had this sense of sort of, I was going to be scaling this stuff back. And all of a sudden I was at a crossroads where it's like, no, here is an opportunity. Are you going to take it? So I wrestled with it. And I was still wrestling with it when the professor came knocking at the door. And that had, I don't know that it was the deciding effect, but it was definitely a kind of contributing effect between that and the dreams and the discussions I had. And ultimately I decided, okay, like, I'm going to do this, which is what I've decided to do. Now, interestingly, when I was talking to a good friend of mine, and we've been friends, we've known each other since we were 10, we've been hanging out since I was 16. We have quite different lives. He's a constitutional lawyer, but a really good close friend of mine. And somebody whose sort of wise counsel I have sought on many occasions, and who has likewise come to me for lots of things when he was having difficult decisions in his life. It's been really supportive. And when I was talking to him about it, initially speaking, he was relatively neutral, and then he was like, look, I told myself I wasn't going to try to compel you, but I think you should really actually consider taking it. And he sort of outlined his reasons. And one of the things that he said struck me very profoundly. He said, I think that 20-year-old Anderson would know exactly what this is. He would recognize it for what it is. And I sort of said, the feeling that you get when somebody has known you a long time and thus can sort of put their finger on something in this way. And so I was like, okay, what? And he's like, yeah, 20-year-old Anderson would have recognized this for what it is. He said, because 20-year-old Anderson was very concerned with the Taoist principle of effortless action, Wu Wei. And I was like, yes, that's true. And he said, when you stopped grasping, then it came towards you. And that was what you always said. Stop grasping, and then, right, things will come. Opportunities will come. And he's right. This is an aggravating principle for lots of people, because it's sort of, it's like the instantiation of sort of good fortune, but not via effort. Not that I'm not making efforts, I am. But anyway, he sort of put his finger on this thing, that it's like 20-year-old Anderson would have known this for what it was. And I thought about that quite deeply, and I was like, yeah, it's true. It's true, he would have. And since that is the energy that I'm looking to connect to, maybe this is the way forward. Maybe this is the way through. That reconnecting to that kind of aspect of things, that Wu Wei, that effortless action, right? That Taoist principle of the flow and going with the flow is what I need to consider, even though it's going to require me effort. It's going to require effort of me, right, to do so. So, an interesting example for me of a particular crossroads moment. But think for yourself, obviously, about what the crossroads means. Mythologically, right, archetypally, the crossroads is a place that you meet the devil, right? You go to the crossroads to meet the devil. And you can, if you look at these various stories, like Robert Johnson, of course, tells a story of how he met the devil at the crossroads. There's a song about it, Crossroads, which has been covered by many people. But Robert Johnson, meets the devil at the crossroads, and the devil teaches him how to play guitar, right? There's this sort of exchange. The idea being that one is selling their soul, but in exchange is gaining sort of worldly ability, worldly skill, right? Learning how to play the guitar. There's this notion that the crossroads is a concentrated place, if not quite an omphalos, if not quite a center of the world, definitely a sort of place of power, right? A place of potential, a place of opportunity. When you think about that kind of aspect of things in your own life, you look at these various crux points that you get to where you're making decisions. Okay, which way am I going? And that's no less the case, right, in, aspects around things like career, okay, where, it's like, okay, it's time. Like, I have to make a decision. I have to, never liked this expression, but I have to shit or get off the pot, right? Like, a decision has to be made. And if I make this decision, it's going to hedge out these decisions. And this is the way that I'm going. This is who I'm going to be. This is what I want to do. I have the following choices, and you have to reify them. And I've talked a lot, okay, over the course of the year about this problem as it exists, I think, more for young people, which is very young people rest in their potential. That's what they're praised on because that's what they have. And the older one becomes, right, the idea is that you have to figure out some way to take that shining cloud of potential and concretize it. But when you get what you get, it's so limited. It's so limited. It's just one little thing, right? Except it's cumulative. It's time-bound and cumulative. So yes, the shining cloud becomes a tiny diamond. But every time you collapse the cloud into a tiny diamond, you get a cumulative heap of diamonds in time. It's cumulative. But that's a totally different principle than the principle that we're used to operating on when we're very young, where it's just potential. I can be anything. I can do anything. Well, the older you get, the less true that is, right? Which is painful. It's painful. And it's not that, strictly speaking, you can't do things, but there are roads that you can't go down anymore, right? There are roads that you can't go down anymore. When I was in my late teens and early 20s, I was entrepreneurial. I had this inventing thing. I had a company. I was doing a thing. And I walked away from that path, right? And every once in a while, when I look at, whatever, some magazine list or something, Toronto Life of the, Toronto's entrepreneurial top 30 under 30, it hits me a little bit with a pang. Because it's like, it's just closed. Time has passed. I'm not going to be that person. And I had wanted to be that person for quite a while. It had been a real focus of my energies. This idea that when you're taking paths, it's not that things are totally lost to you. There are all sorts of things that may remain open, right? Just because you've sort of turned away doesn't mean that it's completely lost to you. But also, like, your life is cumulative and time-bound. And so the more of your potential you collapse into actuality, the more decisions you're making. And they're cumulative, sequential. I'm not going to be an astronaut, probably, right? I'm unlikely at this point to go into politics. I am unlikely to, right? I'm unlikely to become a doctor, right? A thing that doesn't occur to me that much anymore, but I was in the hospital the other day, and so I kind of thought, I was thinking about it again, interacting with, relatively younger doctors, and I thought, I could have been a doctor. It's like, yeah, but I'm not going to be a doctor, right? I'm not going to be a medical doctor in that sense. It's very unlikely. I suppose I could really, reorient, but at what cost? What would I be burning to do that? How would I have to refocus and reshape my life in order to achieve that one thing when things are in sort of a generalized balance? So these crossroad moments that you get where it's like, I'm going to make a choice now, right? Career. But it's not just career. It's not just career. It's also things like relationship. We hit these moments where we're deciding in a relationship, am I going to commit more? Or is this not working? Right? Or, I'm very interested in these two people. Which one? Which one? And maybe it's the case that we balance those things out. Particularly in the modern era, people find sort of variant ways of doing this. There are sort of an increasing number of what you might think of as, historically speaking, atypical arrangements, right? Where people are in, whatever, open marriages, or they're poly, or so on and so forth. So people have, found ways, and if every party involved is fine, that's fine. But for many people, there is a stricter kind of choice structure there. It's like, am I going to be with this person or this person? Am I going to do this or that? Am I going to be this person or be this person? Where am I putting my energies? This is a very hard problem. And it's the kind of hard problem that introduces grieving on all sides. Because no matter what you choose, something gets killed. See, your options can be really good, and this is the pain of collapsing the cloud. Your options might be really good, but it's hard to stack up the concrete, even though it has a different kind of energy and a different kind of currency. It has a solidity to it. It can be hard to stack that against all the other things that might be. And we often want to keep those doors open. But at the same time, we have to make concrete commitments. We have to devote time to things, and it is a limited commodity, right? So the crossroads are these moments of like, right, now you choose. And sometimes it comes at us very starkly. Opportunities arise, and we're like, well, there's a road going this way. Am I going to take it? What does it mean? How do I balance that out? Who will I become? What are the costs? The devil is at the crossroads, and not always in, a bad way. Sometimes it's, Mercurius at the crossroads, if you will, right? Son of God and the devil. And nevertheless, it's like, I'm going to change shape now. I'm going to become something else now. And am I doing that? Is that a direction I'm going? Is that a person I'm going to be? Those are hard problems. And fundamentally, the crossroads is about that. If you think about initiation in those terms, initiation as these transition points in the course of your life are about, the ritual moments where we take the step from one mode of being into another mode of being. Right? We use ritual to transition. Perhaps we even take a new name. We take a new, right? And I've mentioned before, we don't have a lot of that in our culture anymore. Graduation is one of those things. The ceremony that's like, whatever. Thou art no longer a student. Now thou art, whatever. Thou art a holder of a degree. Right? Those sort of professional accreditation things, right? Where we take on a new kind of role. We take on a new kind of authority. Likewise, right, the perhaps what is the most massive threshold or crossroad, right, having children, right, being involved in that particular kind of way, which is, again, a question of relationship, but it's like a radical one. Am I going to transition from being, somebody who has parents to somebody who is parent, right, somebody who is parent? The question of solidifying a relationship, marriage, conventional or otherwise, right, which is this question of, am I going to bring this person into my family? Am I going to try to make a life with them? Questions of where you're going to be, literally in the crossroads, where, am I going to live here or here? Like, what is the shape of my life going to be? And early on, there's lots of flexibility in that respect. Flexibility I used tremendously. My 20s were full. I was filled with wanderlust. My friends nicknamed me Luftmensch. It's a Yiddish term, right? Airman, one who seems to survive off air, but also who drifts from place to place like a tumbleweed. But the Luftmensch days, eventually, it's like, okay, but where am I settling? Like, where am I putting my roots down? So, for instance, one of the things I've sort of reconciled myself to is like, I live in Toronto. This is where my career is now. This is where my friends are, right? And when I think about moving outside of Toronto, that represents like a huge shift. It's like, well, I guess I could maintain my practice and my teaching and stuff here, but I'll have to like commute in. That's a big change. And, am I going to do that? When I consider other things, like buying an inexpensive house on the East Coast, something that's not untoward. It's not impossible. I know somebody who knows somebody, so friend of a friend, I guess, who, got through a divorce and went and visited Newfoundland, New Brunswick maybe, and liked it so much they decided to buy a house. So they went back and did so with their credit card because they could buy a house for $35,000. Like, I think about that kind of thing, and I think, right, There's a whole other life there. There's a whole other life there. But to do that, I'm going to be taking this path. So sometimes, you know, it does to explore the road a little bit, you know, walk a few steps down, walk a year down, see what you think. And then if you don't like it, turn around, pick another path. Why not? But sometimes it requires this very deep commitment. And the Crossroads captures this tension of choice. Crossroads.